The message came at 3:47 in the morning, Earth time. It was weak, broken, and filled with static. But the words were clear enough to make Captain Park Do-hyun drop his coffee cup. Please, anyone. The hegemony has come. They will kill us all. We are the Velith. We ask for help. Please, anyone. Do-hyun stood frozen on the bridge of his small patrol ship, the ESV Remembrance. His crew stared at him. They all knew that name. Every human knew that name. The Velith. 40 years ago, Earth was dying. The collapse wars had destroyed half the planet. Billions were dead. The survivors were starving, sick, and hopeless. Refugee ships fled into space with nowhere to go. Every species in the galaxy turned them away. The powerful Hegemony Coalition had declared humans to be dangerous and unworthy of help. Anyone who helped them would face punishment. But one species said no to the hegemony. One small, peaceful species of insect-like beings opened their doors. The Velith. They gave humans food when humans had nothing. They gave medicine when human children were dying. They gave safe passage through their space when every other route was blocked. They did this knowing the hegemony would be angry. They did this expecting nothing in return. Do-hyun was born on a Velith refugee station. His mother always told him the story. How a Velith nurse had held him when he was sick with fever. How that nurse had stayed awake for 3 days to make sure he survived. He never learned that nurse's name. But he never forgot. Now the Velith were dying, and the galaxy was doing nothing. Lieutenant Yunari walked up beside him. She was young, sharp, and did not trust easily. But even her hard face had gone soft. "Captain," she said quietly, "what do we do?" Do-hyun did not answer. He was already sending the message to Earth Command. 3 days later, Ambassador Kim Tae-woo stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly. Around him sat representatives from 100 species. Some were ancient and powerful. Some were small and afraid. All of them were watching the images on the screens. Velith Prime, a beautiful green world of forests and rivers, now surrounded by hegemony warships. Over 1,000 of them. The largest fleet anyone had seen in centuries. The hegemony representative, a tall creature with gray skin and cold eyes, spoke with a calm voice. The Velith broke hegemony law 40 years ago. They sheltered human refugees against direct orders. They have been given many chances to apologize and submit to correction. They refused. Now, they will face the consequences. The assembly murmured. Many nodded. Law was law. The Velith knew the risks. Sad, but what could be done? A representative from one of the older species stood up. Perhaps a compromise? The Velith could pay a fine. Offer territory. There is no need for violence. The hegemony representative smiled. It was not a kind smile. Genetic correction is required. The Velith species has shown dangerous tendencies. Tendencies toward compassion without calculation. This is a defect. It will be removed. Everyone understood what that meant. Extinction. The hegemony would erase the Velith from existence. Not out of anger. Out of cold, careful planning. They were removing a species that had dared to show kindness without permission. The assembly fell silent. No one wanted to speak. No one wanted to be next. Ambassador Kim Tae-woo stood up slowly. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been a refugee child himself. He remembered the Velith station where he grew up. He remembered learning to read from a Velith teacher who could barely speak human languages, but tried anyway. The assembly turned to look at him. Some looked curious. Most looked pitying. Earth weak. Earth was small. What could Earth possibly say that mattered? Tae-woo looked around the room. He looked at the species who had turned away human refugees. He looked at the species who had watched humans starve and did nothing. He looked at the hegemony representative who stared back with bored contempt. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire hall. 40 years ago, my people were dying. We begged the galaxy for help. We begged you. He pointed at the assembly. All of you. You turned away. You closed your borders. You let our children starve. He paused. The silence was heavy. One species helped us. One species risked everything to save strangers they had never met. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. They simply saw people in pain and chose to help. He turned to face the hegemony representative directly. You call their compassion a defect. You want to erase them for being kind. But Earth has a different word for what the Velith did. He straightened his back. His tired eyes had turned hard. We call it loyalty. And Earth remembers who stood with us in the dark. He walked toward the exit. Every eye followed him. The hegemony representative laughed. And what will Earth do? Send your tiny fleet? Your broken ships? You are nothing. You have always been nothing. Taiwu stopped at the door. He did not turn around. We will do what humans have always done, he said. We will remember. And we will repay. He walked out. The door closed behind him. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Captain Park Do-hyun received the transmission from Earth Command. He read it twice to make sure he understood. Then he looked at Lieutenant Yunari. For the first time in years, he smiled. Set course for Velith Prime, he said. Full speed. We have a debt to pay. Behind them, across Earth's solar system, lights began to turn on. In hidden shipyards carved into asteroids. In secret bases on dark moons. In places the galaxy had never thought to look. Earth was waking up. And Earth remembered everything. Admiral Baek Yoon-ji stood in the command center of Earth's largest orbital station. Around her, screens showed ship after ship powering up and moving into formation. She watched with calm, patient eyes. She had waited 40 years for this day. The other species thought Earth was weak. They thought humans had spent the last 4 decades crying about the past, nursing old wounds, barely surviving. They were wrong. Every factory had a secret purpose. Every shipyard had hidden rooms. Every military academy taught one lesson above all others. The debt must be repaid. Captain Park Do-hyun arrived at the station with his small patrol ship. He had expected to see maybe 50 vessels. He stopped counting at 200 and still saw more coming. 312 warships, Admiral Baek said, standing beside him. Spike-class destroyers, built from the ground up to kill hegemony vessels. Dawn stared. How? The hegemony monitors everything. They would have seen this. Baek smiled. It was a thin, cold smile. They monitor the obvious places. They check the main shipyards, the public stations, the trade routes. They never thought to look in the dark places. The empty asteroids. The abandoned moons. The spaces between stars where nothing interesting ever happens. She turned to face him. Humans learned something during the collapse wars, Captain. We learned to be invisible. We learned to wait. We learned to build in silence and strike without warning. The hegemony forgot that lesson. They will remember it soon. Lieutenant Yunari walked through the main hangar of the command ship, the ESV Vengeance. She had transferred from the Remembrance to serve on Admiral Baek's bridge crew. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The ships were beautiful in a terrible way. Sharp angles. Dark metal. Weapons that looked like they were designed by people who had studied hegemony ships for decades and found every weakness. A woman in engineering clothes approached her. Chief Engineer Wang Jisu. She was small, with messy hair and tired eyes. but she walked like someone who knew exactly what she had built. "You like them?" Jisoo asked. "They're terrifying," Nari admitted. Jisoo nodded. "Good. They should be. I spent 20 years designing these ships. 20 years studying how the hegemony fights. Their shields, their weapons, their formations, everything." She pulled out a small device and showed Nari a diagram. "This is the resonance disruptor. It matches the exact frequency of hegemony shield generators and tears them apart. One hit and their shields are gone. They become soft targets." Nari frowned. "How did you figure out the frequency?" "That information is impossible to get." Jisoo's smile turned sad. "The Velith gave it to us. 40 years ago, they found a crashed hegemony scout ship in their territory. Instead of reporting it, they secretly took it apart and sent the pieces to Earth. They risked everything to give us this gift." She put the device away. "They gave us the tools to save them. They just didn't know it yet." The fleet gathered in the dark space beyond Earth's moon. 300 human warships. More than anyone had ever seen. But they were not alone. As they prepared to leave, other ships began to arrive. Small ships. Old ships. Ships that looked like they had no business being in a battle. A trader convoy from the Marian people. Their captain sent a message. "The Velith saved our colony ship when we ran out of fuel. We were strangers. They helped us anyway. We remember. A medical vessel from the Takari species." Their message was simple. "Velith doctors cured a plague on our homeworld. They asked for nothing. We owe them everything." More ships came. Dozens of them. Then over 100. Species that the galaxy had forgotten. Species that the hegemony had ignored. They came because they remembered small kindnesses. A meal shared. A debt forgiven. A stranger helped without question. Admiral Beak watched the growing fleet with something that might have been pride. "The hegemony thinks kindness is weakness," she said to her bridge crew. "They think compassion is a defect to be erased. But look at this. Look at what kindness built. An army of the grateful. An alliance forged not by treaties or threats, but by simple decency." She sat in her command chair. "Set course for Velith Prime. Maximum speed. We have 12 days to get there before the hegemony deadline." Captain Park Do-hyun stood at the window of his quarters on the Vengeance. He held a small photograph in his hand. His mother and father standing in front of a Velith relief station. They looked thin and tired, but they were smiling. Behind them, a Velith worker was carrying supplies to other refugees. He did not know that worker's name. He never would. But that worker had helped keep his parents alive long enough to have him. Now he was going to war for people he had never met. For a species that had simply chosen to be kind. Nari found him there an hour later. "Are you scared?" she asked. Do-hyun thought about it. "No, I'm grateful. My whole life, I wondered if I would ever get the chance to repay what the Velith did for us. Now I have that chance. Whatever happens next, I can die knowing I tried." Nari nodded slowly. "I never met any Velith. I grew up on Earth after the rebuilding. But my grandmother told me stories. She said a Velith doctor taught her how to set broken bones. She became a medic because of that. She saved hundreds of lives because one Velith took the time to teach a scared human girl." She looked out at the stars. "Kindness spreads, doesn't it? One act creates another and another until it becomes something huge." Do-hyun smiled. "That's what the hegemony doesn't understand. They think they can erase kindness by erasing the kind. But kindness already spread too far. It's in us now. And we're coming." The fleet jumped to faster than light speed. 300 human warships. Over 100 allied vessels. A gathering of the grateful and the loyal. The hegemony had no idea what was coming. High Commander Drelix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Through the massive windows, he could see Velith Prime floating in space like a blue and green jewel. Around him, over 1,000 hegemony warships held their positions, the largest fleet in 100 years. He had waited 40 years for this moment. 40 years since the Velith had insulted the hegemony by helping human refugees. 40 years of the Velith refusing to apologize. Now they would learn what happened to species who showed kindness without permission. 6 hours until the correction begins, his second officer reported. All weapons are ready. The Velith have no military. They cannot resist. Drelix nodded slowly. He felt no anger toward the Velith. He felt nothing at all. This was simply order being restored. Compassion without calculation was dangerous. It had to be removed from the galaxy. On the surface of Velith Prime, Elder Vithi sat in a small garden outside her home. She was very old now, her wings thin and fragile. 40 years ago, she had been a member of the Velith Council. She had cast the deciding vote to help the human refugees. The other council members had called her foolish. Some had called her a traitor. When the hegemony demanded punishment, the council had exiled her to avoid worse consequences. She had spent 40 years alone, watching her people live in fear. Now the fear had become reality, and she could do nothing but wait. Her grandson, a young Velith named Tikri, ran into the garden. "Grandmother, ships are coming. Many ships." Vithi felt her heart sink. The hegemony reinforcements, probably, coming to make sure no one escaped. But then Tikri said something strange. "They are not hegemony ships, grandmother. The signals, they are human." Vithi stood up so fast she nearly fell. Human? That is not possible. But she followed Tikri inside to watch the screens. And what she saw made her old heart stop. Hundreds of ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Sharp, dark vessels with human markings. Behind them, dozens of smaller ships from other species. They formed a line between Velith Prime and the hegemony fleet. "Impossible," Vithi whispered. The humans were broken. They had nothing. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, High Commander Drelix stared at his sensors with something close to confusion. This was not possible. Earth had no fleet. Earth had barely survived its own wars. Where had these ships come from? Before he could speak, a transmission came through on all frequencies. A human voice, calm and cold. "Hegemony vessels. You are in orbit of a world under Earth's protection. You have 6 hours to withdraw. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." Drelix recognized the voice. Captain Park Doyen, commander of a tiny patrol ship that the hegemony had never bothered to track. A nobody, a nothing. And now he was threatening the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Drelix laughed. The sound echoed across his bridge. His officers looked relieved. If their commander was laughing, there was nothing to fear. "Open a channel," Drelix ordered. "Let me speak to this brave little human." The channel opened. Drelix spoke in his most patient voice, like a parent explaining something to a foolish child. "Captain Doyen, I admire your courage, but you are outnumbered 3 to 1. Your ships are primitive. Your weapons cannot penetrate hegemony shields. If you attack, you will die. All of you. Is that really how you want this to end?" There was a long pause. Then Doyen's voice came back, still calm. "Aye, Commander. 40 years ago, your people declared that humans were worthless. You said we were weak, broken, beneath notice. You watched us starve and did nothing. One species helped us. One species showed us kindness when we had nothing to offer in return." Another pause. You want to erase them for that kindness. You want to teach the galaxy that compassion is punished. But you made a mistake, High Commander. You forgot that humans have long memories. And you forgot that we spent 40 years preparing for this exact moment. Drelix felt a small flicker of doubt, but he pushed it down. Numbers did not lie. His fleet was stronger. Prepare to fire, he ordered. Destroy the human fleet. The hegemony ships moved forward, their weapons charged. Energy beams lanced out toward the human vessels. And then something impossible happened. The beams hit the human shields, and nothing happened. No explosions. No damage. The shields held as if the hegemony weapons were toys. Before Drelix could react, the human ships fired back. Strange blue energy pulses that made no sound but hit hegemony vessels like hammers. The first hegemony ship's shields flickered once and died. The second volley tore through the hull like paper. Impossible! Drelix shouted. What is that weapon? Lieutenant Yunari sat at her tactical station on the ESV Vengeance, calling out targets with a steady voice. She felt no joy in the destruction, only grim satisfaction. The resonance disruptors worked exactly as Chief Engineer Huang Jisu had promised. Hegemony shields were useless. Admiral Bikyunji watched the battle unfold with cold eyes. All ships maintain formation. Do not break discipline. We fight together or we die together. The human fleet moved like a single creature. No hesitation. No confusion. Every ship knew its role. They had trained for this for 40 years. Hegemony ships began to burn. 1, then 10, then 50. The mighty fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was being cut apart by a species they had dismissed as nothing. On Velith Prime, Elder Vithi watched the screens and wept. Not from fear, from something she had not felt in 40 years. Hope. They came, she whispered. They actually came. Her grandson held her hand. Who are they, grandmother? Why are they fighting for us? Vithi smiled through her tears. They are humans, child. And humans never forget. Above them, the battle raged. Human ships died too. Dozens of them. The hegemony was weakened but still dangerous. Explosions lit up the void like angry stars. But the humans did not retreat. They did not slow down. They pressed forward with a savage determination that made the hegemony commanders afraid for the first time in their lives. Because they finally understood something terrible. These humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to repay a debt. And they would keep fighting until the debt was paid, or every last one of them was dead. There was no negotiating with that. No threatening it. No stopping it. The hegemony had made an enemy that remembered everything. And now they were learning what that meant. The battle had lasted 6 hours. The void around Velith Prime was filled with burning ships and floating wreckage. Both sides had paid in blood. But the hegemony was losing. High Commander Drelix stood on his damaged bridge, watching his fleet fall apart. Over 300 hegemony ships destroyed. 200 more badly damaged. The humans had lost nearly 100 vessels of their own, but they kept coming. They fought with a fury that Drelix had never seen in any species. Send a message to the homeworlds, he ordered, his voice no longer calm. Tell them we need reinforcements. Tell them the humans are insane. His communications officer worked frantically. But minutes later, he looked up with fear in his eyes. Commander, our reinforcement fleet reports they cannot reach us. There is a second human fleet blocking the route. They are not attacking, just waiting, stopping anyone from coming through. Admiral Bikyunji had planned for everything. She knew the hegemony would call for help. So she had sent 50 ships to block the reinforcement routes. Not to fight. Just to delay. Just to buy time. On the surface of Velith Prime, Sergeant First Class Choi Min-ho led his Special Forces unit through the burning streets of the capital city. Hegemony ground troops had landed before the human fleet arrived. They were rounding up Vela civilians for processing. Min-ho would not let that happen. His unit, the Mailmang, was made of volunteers who had trained their entire lives for this mission. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed to kill hegemony soldiers. But more than that, they carried something else: memory, purpose, rage. Min-ho kicked open a door and found a group of hegemony soldiers holding a dozen Velith children against a wall. The soldiers turned, surprised. They had not expected ground resistance. They never got a chance to fight back. Min-ho's unit moved through the city like ghosts, fast, silent, deadly. Every hegemony soldier they found, they killed. Every Vela civilian they found, they protected. They lost soldiers along the way. Min-ho held one of his youngest team members as she died, a girl named Han Yuna who had just turned 22. "Did we save them?" Yuna asked, her voice fading. "Yes," Min-ho said, even though the battle was not over. "We saved them." "You saved them?" Yuna smiled and closed her eyes. Min-ho laid her down gently and picked up his weapon. There was more work to do. In orbit, Captain Park Do-hyun's ship, the Remembrance, was dying. A hegemony cruiser had scored a direct hit on the engine section. Fires burned through the lower decks. The ship could not maneuver, could not fight, could barely stay together. "Captain, we need to abandon ship." Lieutenant Nari's voice came through the communication system. She had transferred to the Vengeance, but kept in contact with her former captain. Do-hyun looked at his damage reports. Then he looked at the tactical display. The hegemony command carrier, the Eternal Dominion, was badly damaged, but still functional. If it escaped, it could rally the remaining hegemony ships. It could call for more reinforcements. The battle could turn. "No," Do-hyun said quietly. "I have one more thing to do." He ordered his crew to the escape pods. They protested, but he pulled rank. He was the captain. His ship, his choice. When the last escape pod launched, Do-hyun sat alone on his broken bridge. He looked at the photograph of his parents one more time. Then he powered up what remained of the engines and aimed his ship directly at the Eternal Dominion. Admiral Beak saw what he was doing. "Do-hyun, stop. There are other ways." "No, Admiral. There are not. The Remembrance was always meant for this. She was named for memory. Let her be remembered for something worthy." He pushed the engines to full power. The ship screamed as damaged systems overloaded. But it moved, faster and faster. High Commander Drelix saw the human ship coming. He ordered evasive action, but his damaged vessel was too slow. Do-hyun's last transmission went out to the entire fleet. For the Velith. For Earth. For everyone who remembers. The Remembrance hit the Eternal Dominion at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the battlefield like a small sun. High Commander Drelix survived only because his bridge had emergency shields. When the light faded, his flagship was crippled. Dead in space. Unable to fight or run. Admiral Beak closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were hard as stone. All ships finish this. No mercy. No retreat. The human fleet pressed the attack. Without their command carrier, the hegemony fleet fell into chaos. Ships tried to flee and were cut down. Ships tried to surrender and were given one chance to power down weapons completely. Within 2 hours, it was over. The hegemony fleet was broken. Hundreds of ships destroyed. The rest captured or fleeing into deep space. Velith Prime was safe. Admiral Beak ordered her Marines to board the wreckage of the Eternal Dominion. They found High Commander Drelix in his command chair, surrounded by dead officers. He was wounded but alive. They brought him to the bridge of the Vengeance. Admiral Beak looked at him with no hatred, no anger, just cold patience. "Why?" Drelix asked. His voice was broken. "Why sacrifice so much for them? The Velith are nothing. They have no military, no power, no value." Beak pulled out a data device and activated it. Holographic images filled the air. Faces, thousands of them. Human faces. "These are the people who died in the collapse wars," she said. "These are the refugees the Velith saved. These are the children who lived because of Velith kindness." She pointed to one face. "This was my grandmother. She was 7 years old when a Velith doctor cured her fever." She leaned close to Drelix. "You asked why we fight. Here is your answer. Because we remember. Because loyalty is not weakness. Because kindness deserves to be repaid. And because you made the mistake of threatening the people who saved us." She stood up straight. "The Velith have no value? They are worth more than your entire civilization. And today, we proved it." She turned away. "Take him to holding. He will face justice. Not ours. The Velith will decide what happens to him." As Drelix was dragged away, he finally understood. The hegemony had ruled through fear for thousands of years. They had made countless species submit through threats and violence. But they had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that fought not for power or territory or survival. An enemy that fought for love. And that was something the hegemony had no defense against. The galaxy watched in silence. News spread faster than light through every communication network, every trade route, every diplomatic channel. The impossible had happened. Earth had defeated the hegemony. Not just defeated, humiliated. A species that everyone had written off as broken and weak had just shattered the most powerful military force in known space. And they had done it not for territory, not for resources, not for revenge. They had done it for a debt. A 40-year-old debt of kindness. On Velith Prime, the celebrations were mixed with mourning. Thousands of Velith had died in the hegemony ground assault before Sergeant Choi Min-ho's forces arrived. But millions more had been saved. The species would survive. Their kindness would not be erased from the universe. Elder Vithi walked through the streets of the capital city. Everywhere she went, Velith reached out to touch her wings, to thank her. 40 years ago, she had cast the vote that saved the humans. Now the humans had saved her people in return. Admiral Beak-Yunji found her sitting by a fountain in the central square. The old Velith looked up at the human commander with eyes that had seen too much. "You came," Vithi said simply. "After everything, after all these years, you came." Beak sat down beside her. The admiral who had commanded hundreds of warships, who had planned this battle for 20 years, who had watched her ships burn and her people die. She sat quietly next to an old insect who had once voted to help strangers. "Did you think we would forget?" Beak asked. "Yes," Vithi admitted. "Everyone forgets. The galaxy is large, and memories are short. We helped you because it was right, not because we expected anything in return. We assumed we would never see you again." Beak shook her head slowly. "Humans are strange creatures, Elder. We carry our wounds for generations. We teach our children to remember our enemies." She paused. "But we also teach them to remember our friends. Every human child learns about the Velith. Every human child knows that when we were dying, you reached out your hand." She looked up at the sky, where human ships still orbited, watching for any hegemony survivors. "We built those ships for you, not for conquest, not for expansion. We built them so that one day, if you ever needed us, we could come. We spent 40 years preparing to repay a debt." Vithi was quiet for a long time. Finally, she asked a question that had haunted her. "Why? Why sacrifice so much?" "Your ships. Your people. That captain who flew his vessel into the hegemony flagship. Why die for us? Beak thought about Captain Park Do-hyun. She had known him for 15 years. He had been a good officer, a good man. He had died with his parents' photograph in his hand. Because you taught us something, Beak said. When we were broken, when we had nothing, when the galaxy turned its back on us, you showed us that kindness still existed. You showed us that the universe did not have to be cold and cruel. That choice, that simple act of compassion, it changed us. It gave us hope. She turned to face Vithi directly. We are not repaying a debt, Elder. We are continuing a gift. You gave us kindness. We are giving it back. And someday, the Velith will give it to someone else. And they will pass it on. That is how we defeat the darkness. Not with weapons. With memory. With loyalty. With love. Vithi reached out and touched Beak's hand with her thin, fragile fingers. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for remembering. 2 weeks later, Ambassador Kim Tae-woo returned to the Galactic Assembly. The same hall where he had walked out. The same representatives who had refused to help. But everything was different now. When he entered, every representative stood. Some in respect. Some in fear. Some in shame. Tae-woo walked to his place and waited until the hall fell silent. The Velith are safe, he said. The hegemony fleet is destroyed. High Commander Drelix has been handed over to the Velith for trial. They have chosen mercy. He will live out his life in prison, forced to watch the species he tried to erase flourish and grow. He paused, letting the words sink in. Many of you are wondering what this means. What Earth wants. What we will demand in return for our victory. He smiled, and it was not a threatening smile. It was sad. We want nothing. We did not fight for power or territory. We fought because someone helped us when we needed it, and we do not forget. He looked around the room. But let me be clear. Earth remembers everything. Kindness and cruelty. Friendship and betrayal. To those who stood with us, the Mirren traders, the Tokari healers, and all the others who joined our fleet, you have Earth's friendship forever. When you are in danger, we will come. When you need help, we will answer. His voice hardened slightly. To those who stood aside, who watched the Velith face extinction and did nothing, we will remember that too. We do not threaten you. We do not demand apologies. But know this, when your moment of need comes, and it will come, you will have to face us and explain why you deserve the help you refuse to give. He sat down. The assembly was silent for a long time. Years later, a new saying spread through the galaxy. Traders whispered it to each other in port bars. Diplomats mentioned it in quiet negotiations. Parents told it to their children at bedtime. Be kind to humans. They forget nothing. Betray them, and they will wait generations for revenge. Help them, and they will burn worlds to save you. Lieutenant Yoon Nari, now Admiral Nari, commanded the rebuilt ESV Remembrance II. On her desk sat a small crystal given to her by Elder Vithi before the old Velith passed away. The inscription translated simply, remembered. Sometimes, late at night, Nari would hold that crystal and think about Captain Park Do-hyun, about the crew members who died in the battle, about the price of loyalty. It was a heavy price, but it was worth it, because somewhere in the galaxy, a species survived that would have been erased. Children were born who would have never existed. Kindness continued in a universe that often seemed to reward only cruelty. And Earth watched over them all, patient, loyal, remembering. The hegemony eventually rebuilt some of their power. But they never threatened the Velith again. They never attacked any species under Earth's protection. They had learned finally that some enemies could not be intimidated. Some enemies fought for something stronger than fear. On the anniversary of the Battle of Velith Prime, humans across the galaxy lit candles and spoke the names of those who died. It became a tradition that lasted for centuries. And at every ceremony, the same words were spoken. We remember the Velith, who showed us kindness when we had nothing. We remember Captain Park Doyen, who gave his life for a debt he did not owe. We remember all those who fight not for power, but for love. Earth remembers. Earth repays. And Earth will never forget. The candles burned through the night, small lights against the darkness of space. Small, but steady. Small, but eternal. Just like the loyalty that lit them.